Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Teresia Washira. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 22999 free of charge. But first, here are stories making headlines.
Workers dug new graves in Johannesburg Cemetery as South Africa's death toll from the coronavirus pandemic passes 5,000. Tourists are back on Tunisia's beaches after charter flights resume.
We now begin with Africa Roundup stories.
Security forces clashed with demonstrators in Guinea's capital, Conakry, as protests resumed after a 3-month coronavirus hiatus against the president's suspected intention of extending his grip on power. Security forces cordoned off the homes of opposition leader Kolu Delane and national coordinator of an umbrella organization of political parties, unions, and civil society groups. As the government imposed measures to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, the umbrella opposition group suspended protests that had raged since October 2019 over a potential re-election bid by President Alpha Conde. The umbrella organization, the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, ended the truce with a call for protest despite a continued ban on gatherings. Critics argue that the motive behind changing the constitution is to allow him to reset presidential terms limit so that he can run again in October. Conde is a former opposition figure himself who was jailed under Guinea's previous authoritarian regimes. Despite initial hopes of a new political dawn when Conde became the former French colony's first democratically elected president in 2010, critics say his rule has become increasingly authoritarian. South Africa's first black rugby test captain, Siya Kolisi, who led his country to win last year's World Cup, has called for action to address racial inequality in a nation still reeling from the legacy of apartheid. In a 7-minute-long video posted on his Instagram account, the 29-year-old flanker admitted he had previously shied away from topic because he was scared, but he vowed that the time to be scared and to be silent is over in South Africa, ranked one of the world's most unequal society. His remarks were triggered by the local Black Lives Matter movement and protests over the killing of an African-American, George Floyd, by a white police officer in Minneapolis in May. Racial divisions have plagued South African sport, particularly rugby and cricket, since the fall of the white minority apartheid rule in 1994. Kolisi stated he felt that he had failed as a leader and he hadn't addressed the issue for a long time. A Nigerian official collapsed on Monday during a televised parliamentary hearing held as part of an investigation into allegations of mismanagement at an organization with a remit to foster economic development in oil-rich Niger Delta region. Daniel Pondey, acting manager director of the Niger Delta Development Commission, was taken to hospital after slumping forward in his chair during the session in which he gave evidence to the panel. Lawmakers in the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of parliament, are investigating alleged corruption around procurement at the NDDC, a government body over 20 years. The probe was ordered by President Muhammadu Buhari in October. Nigeria's oil-rich producing Niger Delta heathlands remains impoverished despite providing most of the oil produced in Africa's biggest crude oil exporter. Oil is Nigeria's main export and the mainstay of its economy, the continent's largest.
Moving on, Sudan's former autocratic president Omar Al Bashir could face the death penalty if convicted over his 1989 coup against the democratically elected government of Prime Minister Sadek Al-Mahdi. It is the first time in the modern history of the Arab world that the architect of a coup goes on trial.
Sudan's former autocratic president Omar Al Bashir, overthrown amid a popular pro-democracy uprising last year, faces trial over the military coup that brought him to power more than 3 decades ago. Bashir, 76, who is already behind bars for corruption, could face the death penalty if convicted. Bashir will be on the dock with 10 military personnel and 6 civilians, including his former Vice President Ali Osman Taha and Bakri Hassan Saleh, as well as former ministers and governors. They are all accused of having plotted the June 30th, 1989 coup when the army arrested Sudan's political leaders, suspended the parliament and other state bodies, closed the airport and announced the putsch on the radio.
The articles open against the accused fall under the constitutional system from the Chapter 96 of the Penal Code of 1983. The crime was committed on 30th June 1989, and the law that was in effect at that time was the 1983 law. This trial will be a warning to anyone, whether from a political or military force, who tries to destroy the constitutional system. This is a criminal act according to the law. This will safeguard Sudanese democracy through these trials.
The Khartoum trial against him and 16 co-accused comes as Sudan's post-revolution transitional government has launched a series of reforms in hopes of fully rejoining the international community. Sudan has also pledged to hand over Bashir to the International Criminal Court to face trial on war crimes and genocide charges related to the Darfur conflict, which left 300,000 people dead and millions displaced in a scorched earth campaign against a 2003 insurgency.
This is a political trial which is being disguised within the law as a legal trial. This is a political trial being held in a hostile environment on the part of the judicial system against the defendants.
يواجه فيه المتهمون عداء سافرا جدا من الأجهزة العدلية المختصة بتنفيذ القانون. العمل السياسي المقصود منه.
In fact, this trial is aimed at the Islamic movement, and its sole purpose is to present it as a terrorist movement.
وصمها بأنها حركة إرهابية.
It is the first time in the modern history of the Arab world that the architect of a coup goes on trial, although the man dubbed the true brain behind the military overthrow, Hassan Turabi of the National Islamic Front, died in 2016. Bashir, who was later elevated to the rank of general, stayed in power for 30 years before being overthrown on April 11th last year after several months of unprecedented youth-led street demonstrations.
Shifting gears now to COVID-19 matters, workers dug new graves in a Johannesburg cemetery as South Africa's death toll from the coronavirus pandemic passes 5,000. Terming death an uncomfortable matter to engage in, the authorities say they will nevertheless ensure that there is adequate burial space, as a reality the government must contend with. A surge in the number of deaths has changed tone with which the South African government speaks about the pandemic. Minister of Health Zweli Mkhize urged citizens to respect recommended hygiene measures. The peak of the pandemic in South Africa is expected over the next few weeks. Authorities imposed a strict lockdown rather, in late March, but the measures have been progressively eased to avoid economic collapse. The country is fully into the runaway phase of the pandemic, and people are now visibly stressed with long queues for essential services in supermarkets. Tourists are now back on Tunisia's beaches after charter flights resumed to the North African country following a break of more than 3 months due to the coronavirus pandemic.
Tunisia, a country of some 11.5 million people, reopened its borders on June 27th, and travelers from countries it classifies as green, including France, Germany and Luxembourg, are not subject to any coronavirus restrictions. Tourism accounts for between 8 and 14% of Tunisia's GDP and employs around 500,000 people, but the novel coronavirus crisis has hit the sector hard. Tourism revenues declined by around 50% between January 1st and July 10th compared to the same period last year.
Oui. La raison pourquoi on a ouvert la Tunisie en premier.
Why did we open Tunisia in the first place? It is to get the okay from the European Union that we could travel to Tunisia. That's a priority. Secondly, Tunisia has always been a friendly and loyal country with Luxembourg and vice versa. It was to open Tunisia as soon as possible.
Et vice-versa. Et ça venait de soi d'ouvrir.
J'ai intégré le fait.
I've come to realize that you have to live with COVID-19 because I think I can catch it in Champagne in Mar as much as I can catch it in here if I'm not careful. You just have to be careful, in my opinion. You're going to have to live with it for a long time. So we have to start now. If we're going to be afraid to go on holiday, I'm not going to say I'm not afraid. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to make sure we are all careful.
Je vais faire attention. Qu'on fasse tous attention.
Authorities are counting on health regulations to reassure tourists and the sector and have halved hotel capacity in order to comply with anti-coronavirus measures. Authorities are hoping for a revival in the sector in early 2021.
We can't save the whole season, but we are going to try everything to save part of it and especially to restore confidence. That's the most important thing right now. It's that the people who work in tourism regain confidence and believe in it again. I believe that this has been achieved with the arrival of the plane and others soon.
Tourist businesses are now allowed to use 100% of their capacity without exceeding 50% in common areas such as restaurants, pools and indoor sports facilities. Some 155 masks-clad holiday makers from France, Germany and Luxembourg last week on the resort island of Jabba with temperature checks, but also hostesses offering them banquets of jasmine.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come.
Opposition insists president must quit.
Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Teresia Washira. Elsewhere, hundreds of protesters gained entry into the remote El Kamo oil production site located in the desert south of Tunisia's southeastern town of Tatacoin after they forced their way past military forces in the latest demonstrations to demand jobs and development in the marginalized region.
Hundreds of protesters forced their way into an oil production site in southern Tunisia in the latest demonstration to demand jobs and development in the marginalized region. Demonstrators pushed their way past military forces to enter the remote El Kamo production site located in the desert south of the southeastern town of Tatoun. A hefty contingent of forces had been deployed to the site, including a helicopter, but there was no violence between security personnel and protesters who chanted, "Tatoun does not give up," and sang the national anthem. The demonstration follows weeks of unrest in Tunisia's south, one of the country's most marginalized regions, burdened by above-average unemployment, failing infrastructure and a stunted private sector. The demonstration follows weeks of unrest in Tunisia's south, one of the country's most marginalized regions, burdened by above-average unemployment, failing infrastructure and a stunted private sector. Protesters have taken to the streets to demand the government honor a 2017 pledge made that year after similar unrest to invest millions to develop the region and provide jobs to thousands. In recent weeks, demonstrators have held a sit-in in Tatun and closed roads to prevent trucks from accessing El Camor, where a valve had been blocked to shut down oil production during the 2017 protests. Since July 9th, a few dozen demonstrators have been camped in the desert near El Camor. Other groups joined them before the site was breached. The Tunisian oil sector is modest, producing an average of 38,000 to 40,000 barrels per day. Marathon negotiations are underway to find within 10 days a new premier who can win the confidence of parliament by September, failing which Tunisia will have to hold a general election.
Away from that, Muslim worshippers returned for prayer at the Hassan II Mosque, one of the largest in African continent, in Morocco's Casablanca, following decisions by the Ministry of Religious Endowments and Islamic Affairs to reopen mosques.
Effectivement, suite à la décision.
The reopening was following the decision of the Ministry of Religious Endowments and Islamic Affairs concerning the reopening of mosques throughout the national territory to accomplish the 5 prayers except the Friday prayer, starting from July 15, 2020.
Des 5 prières, à l'exception de la prière de vendredi. En ce sens, la fondation de la mosquée Hassan II a commencé par...
In this sense, the foundation of the Hassan Mosque began with a vast disinfection and sterilization operation. The operation was carried out in coordination with the regional delegation of Islamic Affairs and the local development company Casabaya, covering the entire prayer room for men, prayer room for women, as well as the surrounding area.
Salle de prière pour hommes, la salle de prière pour femmes, ainsi que l'esplanade et les alentours. Et, la fondation de la mosquée Hassan II, elle est consciente.
The foundation of the Hassan II Mosque is aware of the sanitary state that our country is experiencing and concerned about the protection of the faithful. It has committed itself to conform to the recommended sanitary protocols and establish the Ministry of Religious Endowments and Islamic Affairs.
Préconisé et instauré par le ministère des Habous et des Affaires islamiques.
Thousands of wildebeasts crossed from Tanzania's Serengeti into the Masai Mara Nature Reserve in Kenya. This year, only a few animal watchers are there to witness the yearly migration, as international tourism is still shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic.
At this time of the year, we witness quite big herds of migration from Serengeti into the Masai Mara. But this time around, they came late. It was about the weather. Witness the pandemic of the whole world globally. And now the big issue here is, as you can see all around us, is very few people. Generally, it is the locals who are witnessing this happening. For this time of the year, usually could be like about 1,000 and more tourists, but because of the pandemic, it's hit the globe, it is quiet.
We all know the pandemic is all over the world, and Kenya closed the sky. So for a very long time, in fact, about 4 months, in the Masai Mara, there were no tourists at all. Last week, as Nairobi was opened, local tourists are coming. And from next week, hopefully, the international tourists will come. And then we will breathe again, because I think the Masai community was suffering a bit from the lack of tourism and the lack of jobs.
Now, most Kenyans are now concerned over the increase in COVID-19 cases that are being reported daily. Some are musing of a possible lockdown in the coming days after President Uhuru Kenyatta called for an emergency meeting today to assess the country's preparedness and a review on containment measures in the fight against COVID-19. Our reporter Harry Chimea had a chat with Nairobi residents, and this is what they had to say.
The possibility of lockdown has caused mixed reactions among Kenyans. Although many are concerned over the surge in COVID-19 cases in the country, Wanjiku is more concerned about her source of livelihood and that of her family.
Lockdown ikirudishwa, maisha itakuwa ngumu kwa sababu najua mara mingi watu hufanya kazi Nairobi, tunatafuta kutoka huku, ushago hakuna pesa.
Hakuna haja ya lockdown. Kwa sababu hata saa ile tuko na lockdown ndio tunafinyika sana na tunakaa sana bila kuona pesa. Wajaribu kuangalia mwananchi wa kawaida, mtu wa jua kali anafinyika sana huko nje.
Tuenye naomba tunaona vile bado walifungua. Bado kuna vile tumefaidika, bado kuna wenye wameumia.
kitu yenye naomba tuendelee tu hivyo, kila mtu ajichunge.
On July 6th, President Kenyatta eased some COVID-19 containment measures, among them the cessation of movement in and out of Nairobi metropolitan area, among other counties. The president, however, warned of the possibility of reverting to a lockdown should the spread of the virus pose a threat to the health infrastructure.
Mimi naona hii lockdown kwanza irudi, kwa sababu bado watu hawajajua kujikinga, ama kulingana na venye hii idadi inaongezeka, bado watu hawajajua kukaa na hii ugonjwa.
The only thing wanaweza fanya ni waende tu house to house, wapime kila mmoja. Hii mambo ya kuita ati mtu wewe kuja uende, nani atakubali kuenda? Ngumu sana. Lakini ukienda house to house, ikuwe like vile wanahesabingi watu, inakuwa lazima upimwe. Na ukishapimwa ukijulikana uko nayo, hapo hapo unafungiwa kwa hiyo hao yako, gava kushughulikia tu hapo hapo ndani.
With cases now manifested in 44 counties, most of them being underprepared to fight the virus, President Uhuru Kenyatta has scheduled an extraordinary session this Friday, July 24th, to meet governors following a surge of COVID-19 infections in recent days. Health Ministry Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe, time and time again, has retaliated the need for Kenyans to take personal responsibility.
You save me, I save you. Wewe niokoe, na mimi nikuokoe. Let's save each other. This is what is called personal responsibility.
Alafu sisi wenyewe tu tujue venye tunajichunga, kama ni kuvaa mask, tuvae mask vizuri, tujichunge, tusanitize hivyo tu.
Kuomba tu God, juu sasa mambo imehappen na tujui what next. Hao ndio wanaweza, Mungu ndiye anaweza tusaidia tu. Lakini lockdown nayo itaturudisha nyuma hata kiuchumi.
Those are some of the sentiments echoed by Kenyans regarding the necessary containment measures in the fight against COVID-19. Harriet Chimea, Switch TV, Nairobi.
With South Africa's lockdown being gradually eased, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that minibus taxis will once again be allowed to carry full load of passengers, which has some residents worried.
It's hard because even when we are standing by the entrance sanitizing people, some people say, no, we don't want it, and they just go past. It's really difficult working under this pandemic. Firstly, I also take public transport, and sometimes inside the taxi there is somebody not wearing a mask.
But it's scary because, we are now in a taxi for it's a full taxi, and you never know which person you're sitting next to, and you don't know their health and where they've been. So it's actually not really hard, but scary. Yeah, it's not.
Actually just scared of dying, eh? Yeah, just scared of dying, and it's very dangerous. It's very quick to get the disease. That's the problem. It's a disease that is not even easy to prevent it, but we try by all means, but it's difficult.
And that's all we had on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Chacha, and our sign language interpreter is Teresia Washira. Until next time, do have yourself a great time.